Okay. All right, everybody online can hear me and see my screen?
Yes.
Let's assume that's a yes. I have no in-class people right now, so when I ask questions, I'm relying on the online audience to respond. Because we're going to start off today talking about what you found in our homework assignment dealing with the mobile VR stuff. So let's start off with the first part of that. What were the differences you found between the Oculus Quest and the Quest 2 besides the price, bringing the price way down by, actually, what are they? The lowest price one used to be 400, now it's 200. So they brought it down by almost half, about half. So what else did we find? You got to unmute yourself if you're trying to talk.
Processor change.
Processor change. Tell me about that. What was the change?
Previous, Oculus version 1, it was using Snapdragon 835, and this was using 836.
Okay. So one thing you'll notice there is they're using the same processors as the mobile devices we've talked about up to this point, right? So when you go out and buy an Android device today, you're using one of the Snapdragon chips. And last time I talked about kind of the predecessor to the Oculus Quest. If we were looking at predecessor, so let's just do mobile VR evolution. So we'll call the first one Google Cardboard. So this was a cardboard based, well, really it was a, let's call it what it was, an uncomfortable but inexpensive way to strap your phone to your face, allowing you to experience VR relatively cheaply. All right, from there we had some more refined Google Cardboard, let's call it compatible headsets that were much more comfortable and not overly expensive, but didn't deliver a new experience other than comfort. From there, we had the Oculus Gear, which was specifically for the Samsung Galaxy smartphones, giving good comfort and a VR-based OS, making the user experience much, much better. Smartphone based for all these. Let's see. Google had a competitor with this. Anybody know the name of the competitor for the Google VR?
Google Daydream view.
Yep. So Google Daydream. was specifically for the Google Pixel devices. Later was compatible with all Android smartphones. Good comfort and a VR-based OS. So call these guys the premium smartphone-based VR. Okay, so from here, Google Daydream basically made theirs available to other smartphones before it kind of lost. So Google Daydream's pretty much gone at this point. We'll get back to it in a second because I'm guessing that some of you found a mobile, standalone mobile device that was running Google Daydream. We'll see if you stumbled upon that. But Oculus Gear has continued to evolve to the Oculus Go, which is the same as the Gear, but has the phone, well, same as the Gear, but does not require a smartphone. It is Snapdragon based and is standalone, running the same OS as the Oculus Gear. And this guy had what's called 3 degrees of freedom, which means you could turn your head side to side. Oh, I guess that telling the light thing not to go off didn't actually do anything. So turn your head side to side, up and down, and track a hand controller, which served as a pointing device. All right, then we get to the Oculus Quest. Same OS as the Go, but now with 6 degrees of freedom, allowing you to use 2-hand control and move about in 3D space. Also standalone. Right. And then you're telling me we have the Oculus Quest 2, same OS as the Quest, faster processor, still based on Snapdragon. Anything else you found about the Quest 2 versus the Quest?
IDP setting.
What setting?
IDP.
So the distance between the eyes?
Yes.
Okay,
So
what was the
Quest,
difference between the Quest and the Quest 2?
Quest 2, it supports three variations, like we can set for 3 measurements. And
Okay.
we don't have that much of difference for settings.
Okay, and what about the Quest? Did it support anything?
Quest, it's supported, but it's not that comfortable for the measurements were not that great for setting.
Okay, if I'm remembering correctly on the Quest has a little slider that allows you to kind of move between the different, so the idea is in VR, you want the lenses to be the split between the lenses to be the right distance to cover the actual width of your eyes. Now we're all human beings, so the width of our eyes is within a a range, and we're dealing with millimeters. It's not like we're going to have 3 feet between our eyes or something. But the idea is getting that to adjust is something that is beneficial for being able to see clearly in VR, being not getting motion sickness, things like that. And the Quest 2 had, if I am thinking correctly, the Quest had a button or slider thing that you could adjust it, and it was hard to get it just perfect. Where the Quest 2 has just 3 settings that you can basically say narrow, normal, wide, something like that, and that kind of fit a high percentage of the population. The same thing was true with the Oculus Rift 2, which came out. The original Rift had an adjustment, which people liked. The Rift 2 did not. And the complaint was, oh, well, this is going to be problematic for some people, where Oculus's argument was it'll work for, I don't know, they said something like 97% of the population or something like that. Everybody else will get violently ill. So something along those lines. Okay. What else?
And Quest 2 also promises better battery life.
Okay. Did you find out why it?
Yeah. It says that it has um, I'm just looking through my paper here. Uh, it has an intelligent battery management system. Uh, which saves battery, and
It has to
it
monitoring LEDs to save the battery life.
So was the battery physically a different battery, or was this done at the software level?
What was it?
Was there physically a different kind of battery inside of it, or was it done at the software level?
I think it's I mean, not at software level, but I think it's just like different in its design. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I actually recall that the Quest 2 might have a smaller battery than the Quest did in terms of milliamp hours. Can anybody confirm that? Which then makes it more impressive that its battery life is said to be either better or at least as good, because one of the goals of the Quest 2 is to make it lighter. We'll call the original Quest was a really amazing device in that it brought VR, like high-end VR, to the completely wireless world, but that came with kind of a front-heavy thing, where your kind of your neck was was drawn down a little bit, and so they started coming out with like custom straps for it that allowed you to have like a second battery pack on the back. So it gave you more battery life, but at the same time, it also balanced the weight between the front and the back of the device, making it more comfortable to wear, even though it was heavier. So if I do recall, I think that Oculus Quest, first Quest 2 battery. Let's look at the specs here. I think the Quest 2 has a physically smaller battery. So there's the differences in the two devices. You can see them in this picture here. The one on the right is the original Quest. The Quest 2 is the one on the left. Okay. So we're just going to focus on this far left column here. So in the far left column, notice the resolution difference, pixels per eye, which I'm sure somebody was going to bring up here. So the Quest 2 has a higher resolution screen. Okay. Notice also the refresh rate, and this is kind of a big deal. 72 hertz was considered pretty impressive on the original Quest. So when we talk about refresh rate, we're talking about the how quickly the screen refreshes. Now, the reality is, so if we kind of think about this relatively speaking, if you're watching TV, normal TV, typically a show is being displayed at like 30 frames a second, something like that. But your TV probably is running at what's called 60 hertz for a normal, relatively inexpensive, not trying to do anything special type TV. So technically, every single second that your screen can refresh 60 times. And if you're doing 30 frames a second, that means that you should gain some smoothness because the transition between one frame, one picture, and the next picture can happen twice. Is only happening once every 30th of a second, but the screen is refreshing once every 60th of a second. So you're getting 2 screen refreshes for the cost of one picture to show, which should add some smoothness. Now we go up from there into like 120 hertz and 240 hertz refresh rate screens, which should continue to give you more smoothness. Now, the idea here is this is where it kind of kicks back to comfort with VR and motion sickness and stuff like that. It's that the human eye, roughly, let's say, can experience something in the 40 frames per second rate before we don't notice a difference. Now, noticing a difference is different than experiencing a difference that we can't necessarily explain. So if you have a screen that is refreshing at 90 hertz versus a screen that is refreshing at 30 hertz, you will be able to feel the difference in smoothness, even if it's just, almost imperceptible. It does exist. Okay. Even though your eyes aren't necessarily catching all the data, you are getting a smoother transition between those frames. Now, we can say that maybe this isn't that big of a deal when you're watching TV, something like that. Where if you go into Best Buy and you're buying your TV for the Super Bowl or something like that, they're going to push the 120 hertz and the 240 hertz TVs, which typically are more expensive. They're going to push those on you because they're going to say these are better for sports and for video games. And where you can see this with a very old TV is, we'll use a Wisconsin example like Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers throws the football pretty fast. And if you were using an old 30 frame per second TV and he threw a fast pass, you would actually see the ball multiple times on the screen because it was, your eyes were seeing that transition from the ball going from point A to point B through those frames because of how often it was refreshing, and your eyes could stay ahead of that. All right. So the same thing is true as you get to 60 hertz and 120 hertz and 240 hertz, you notice less kind of laggy type stuff like that. Now, there's a point where, maybe the difference between 60 hertz and 120 hertz is, I would say, probably less than 1% of a quality improvement. And then probably 120 hertz to 240 hertz is probably, again, less than 1%. That's potentially me making up those numbers, but that's been my experience. So you have to weigh that against the cost you're spending on the device, but whatever. So that's for like kind of normal television watching or even playing video games on a big screen TV or even a computer monitor. But once you get to VR and you have these screens effectively mounted, a centimeter from your eye, it starts making a difference, especially when you consider what VR is attempting to do. It's trying to give us a false reality, a virtual reality, right? So out of curiosity, and you can do this here, can I edit these? I want to do a poll because I am interested in this. Hold on a second. All right, I'm just interested in, so a poll should have just popped up on the screen. Oh, we're seeing who's paying attention. We got 8 people online and we only have 4 answers so far. I know clicking the button for yes or no is rough. We should get 8 answers if the folks are sitting in front of their computer. Yeah, we're up to 5. I'm not even able to see who did vote and who didn't vote, but we're at 6. 2 more. This is how I'm taking attendance. Actually, I guess technically we're only missing 1 person because I'm guessing for, oh no, it says 9 participants. So well, we're still missing 2 people because I'm one of them. I'm one of the participants. All right, that's it. We got 6 votes out of 8 people. Galib, did you vote?
Yes.
Who didn't vote? Do we know who didn't vote? Okay, we're at 7. People are getting shamed into voting now. We're missing 1 person who didn't vote. Wally, did you vote?
Yes, I did.
Kushal? Oh, no, we're at all 8 now. They've been shamed in. All right, so interesting enough, just like our poll for Android versus iPhone, about half of you have done VR and half of you haven't. I'm going to update this a little bit. We're going to add a poll. All right, so we're going to say,
Can you change the option to multiple choice?
I can. I'm
Yeah.
in the middle of doing a, oh. Why did that reset it? But yeah, I'm doing that, hold on. Let's see. I think, does that cover them? I think so. Do that. I'm gonna do another poll. I'm going to choose my poll. There we go. Ignore question 2 because that was my mess up. So, which VR have you messed with? So click all that apply. The cardboard, Go VR, you know, and I know 4 of you can't answer this because you didn't do any. So for the other 4 of you who have done VR, give me an idea of which VR you've experienced so I can kind of, when I talk about stuff, put it in the context of that. All right, we got 1 participant so far. 3 more of you. All right, we got 2 so far. We got 3 so far. So wait on 1 last person who's done VR to give me some information on which VR they've done. It's probably over there making an omelet. Cooking breakfast. All right, well, I'll leave it open for now, but I'll just start talking about it a little bit. So actually what's interesting here is that the majority, so 3 of the 4 of you at least, who said you've done VR have used the Quest or the Quest 2, which is really cool because that's, I think I mentioned last time, is what I think is the best VR solution because you get best of both worlds. You can have PC VR with that. You can also do standalone wireless VR using the Oculus ecosystem. And then on top of that, I mentioned our setup across the hall here where we're actually doing PC VR wirelessly. So you get the higher end graphics and stuff like that of PC based VR using the high end graphics card on the PC. But you also have the ability to not have the wire tethered to you getting wrapped around your feet and stuff like that. And then on top of all that, we also have a really cool VR chair that you sit in and it moves automatically and things like that. So, I mean, it's like the ultimate VR experience that we have right here on campus. All right. So, but this gives me an idea that, so several of you have done what would be considered what I would call real VR. So real VR would be the, well, that's probably unfair. So real VR would be the Go, Gear, Daydream, at least the Go and up. And the reason I say that is when we talk about a device, a mobile device like a Oculus Go, it's really, so let me kind of go back here. I'll leave the poll up for now and we'll see if we can fish. Actually, the poll will just be in the middle of your screen then. I'll end the poll. We'll just give an F to the 1 person who didn't vote. Okay, or possibly they misclicked on the original one and they don't have anything to report. So given that half of you have had some experience with these, we're going to say 3 degrees of freedom We're going to say 3 versus 6 degrees of freedom. Okay. So, we mentioned before that, 3 degrees of freedom, really it deals with head movement. So 3 degrees means the head can go side to side, up and down, and tilt side to side. So if you're watching my head here, I can do this, I can do this, and I can do this. Okay, that's our 3 degrees of freedom. Now, what does that allow you to do? So for instance, I was talking about the real VR devices, let's say, the ones that have become practical. So that means they need to be running an operating system that's compatible with VR so that you don't have to take the headset off between applications. You can kind of just live in VR for an hour or 2 hours, however long you can stay in there. So it's got to have that. So that starts with kind of let's call it the Oculus Gear VR. But really that was kind of testing the waters. You had to have that high-end Samsung phone, but at the same time, it got overheated very easily. The phone wasn't really designed for that type of device. So you would get 15, 20 minutes of VR before it overheated and told you that you had to take a break because you were effectively playing games on your device, but you were playing those games. So just like you take your smartphone out now and you play a game on it, the newer smartphones have better graphics cards and things like that. Your phone gets pretty hot. The newer ones are better at dissipating heat. I mean, my Note 10, or actually this is a Note 20 Ultra. This is the latest phone from Samsung. This guy has liquid cooling in it. It's like made for gaming, I guess. I don't play that many. I play my Hearthstone game on it, but I don't play a lot of the fast action games on it. But point is, you could. But we'll say that the first real VR, standalone VR, was the Oculus Go, and that guy had 3 degrees of freedom. All right, so an example of this is the Oculus Go. Now, 6 degrees of freedom means you can do all this stuff. You can go up in 3D space, down in 3D space, forward/back. So actually, let's just do up, down. Up/down in 3D space, forward/back in 3D space. So let's see, that's this, and this. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What's my 6th? I'm missing a body. What were you gonna say?
I think like turning the whole body to the opposite side. I mean like the 360
turning around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Turning around. Oh, actually, you can do the turning around thing though in the 3 degrees. So we're still missing one. Because I think this tilt side to side thing is a combination of side to side and up and down. So we'll say 360 turn here. We'll say 360 turn here. Go up, down, forward, back, 360 turn. still missing one. Let's see, 3, there's 6 degrees of freedom. Rotates their head, pivots left or right. Yeah, that's kind of what I said originally. 6 degrees forward and backwards, laterally or vertically, up and down. Oh, because you could move. Yeah, I don't know. I think we've kind of covered it. Let's just leave it at this. So this would be like the Oculus Quest in our example. So I asked the question of, well, let's go this route. Is 6 degrees of freedom better than 3? What do you think?
I think obviously yes, because it provides more kind of comfort in terms of movement.
Okay. So as it is with the answer with most things, we could say it depends on what you are gonna use the device for. So this is really a question for those of you who have done some stuff with VR. What is the best use for VR? So for the 4 of you who've used VR before, what has been the thing about VR that you have found the coolest? Let's go 2 routes. What have you found the most impressive? And then what have you also found the most practical? Because those 2 things can mean different things, right? Because we're trying to imagine as technologists, what are practical uses of VR? If we fast forward a decade, how are people actually going to be using VR in their daily lives? Versus if you sat down with VR and somebody put some experience on there, what would you find really impressive today? Even if it wasn't necessarily practical or something, it just gives you that shock value for like, oh my gosh, that was cool. So for those of you who have done VR, give me some examples of practical uses of VR that you think are there, and then shock value, coolest experiences. What do you got for me? And if you don't have a mic, you can put it in chat. I'll pay attention to the chat. Yeah, I'll kind of get us started with the thing. I'll give you the example that I think is the coolest. So practical is virtual travel slash let's call it telepresence. Spell it right? Doesn't look right. Yeah, but all right. So so this would be like the idea of attending meetings slash and really this is more of a conferences, concerts, shows, things like that remotely. All right, so so for instance, I think I maybe even mentioned last class, there is, and we have it all set up in S109 across the hall if you want to come check it out sometime, just contact me or Blade and we can set up a time to demo the stuff. But or Waleed is involved in that project as well. But I've been to this last, actually not this last June, 2 years ago in June, my wife and I went to Rome, and we did all the tour stuff and saw the Colosseum and all the fountains and all that stuff. So we came home from that. Good trip, tiring trip, all that stuff. And I thought, you know what, I wonder what's out there for virtual travel related to Rome, kind of so I could compare apples to apples in a very short sequence. I was just there, okay? And I used the Oculus Go for this. So effectively, I went onto YouTube and found 360 tour videos of Rome that took me on the kind of the same tours. In fact, in some cases, it was the identical tour. One of the groups there is called the Roman Guys, who do tours of Rome, and they have VR videos as well as you can take an airplane over to Rome and pay the money and go around Rome. And I'll tell you what, the VR experience was every bit as good as actually being there. In fact, it was, I would say it was better in many cases where, you weren't having to wait in lines, you weren't having to deal with the hot heat, all that stuff. Now, I don't want to take away from the experience of traveling and seeing the world, face to face, because there is value in those experiences. But I'll tell you what, if you look at going out and spending, I mean, you can't buy the Oculus Go anymore because now basically everything's in the Quest and you can do the same stuff with the Quest. But if you looked at spending $150 on an Oculus Go and you can travel the world for $150, that's pretty practical use, isn't it? And then some of the tour guides actually started doing live commentary. So you would join their group and they would be walking around the streets of Rome, for example. I'm just using Rome as my example here. And you can ask them questions. You can tell them to go over to some vendor on the side of the road or whatever, or maybe they're like in a public market and ask them a question, or, you could even have them buy you something there and they'll ship it to you, stuff like that. It was kind of amazing. I want to show one more thing on here that I think is huge. Sports. Bunch of exclamation points there. Good example of that would be like if you're a Milwaukee Bucks fan, and now their team is good. We're good every 20 years or so. Well, if you want to get front row seats at a Bucks game, it's pretty expensive. But sitting with your feet on the actual floor at an NBA game is kind of an amazing experience. I'm not sure it's worth $600 a seat, but it is an amazing experience. I've done it a bunch of times. But it's expensive. Now, what if you can have that front row seat experience for $50? Is it worth $50? I think yes. Definitely worth $50. What they can do is they can put a 360 camera there in the position of one of the seats on the floor, and then you can basically buy that seat, let's just say for like $50, and now you have floor seats at that game instead of spending $600, and you can just stay home and watch the game in VR, turn your head, hear really the biggest thing is to see how fast these guys are moving, but to hear them talk to each other. That's the real thing you get in that front row. Some of it's not so nice things they say to each other, but you're part of the action. And then there's other VR things like with the NBA where, and these have been free. Now you can do like a season pass where you can watch. It's like 2 VR games a week, where depending on who has the ball, you're either sitting on the backboard of that basket, the one they're going for, or you're behind them following them down the court, or you're on the side court. So basically you move to the most ideal position, so if you're watching Giannis for the Bucks come in for a huge dunk, you're sitting there basically on the rim as he dunks in your face. So it's a pretty amazing type of experience, and it's like $30 a season now, and in the first couple of years it was free. So those are the kinds of practical uses for VR that we can all say these replace real life things. And this has become even more important during COVID, right? As we're seeing technology leverage some of these things that we're missing. I mean, even right now, I'm sitting in a dark room because Galib didn't show up to class with 0 attendees. 0. I'm sitting in a dark room talking to myself. Okay. But I have an audience of 9 people who are visiting this class remotely because you can. Okay. Now,
I have a question here.
go ahead.
So last year I've read an article regarding the I don't know if it's VR or AR. It talked about shopping experience. Like before going to the store, you can just launch the site and just watch for the products which you like and
Sure.
see for yourself. I don't know if it falls under AR or VR.
Probably both. I mean, so I think the thing you're talking about is like one of the companies that had an app that did that was Ikea. So you can get the Ikea app, and Ikea has, if you've ever been to an Ikea store, it's a cool adventure. I mean, their furniture is relatively inexpensive and kind of very innovative for putting it together and stuff, but I know I seem petite, but in real life I'm quite large, so I have to be careful with the weight limit of some of their things. But if you've been to my office, I have this giant like cube storage thing that I got from Ikea. But in any case, you can go to Ikea and go through the whole adventure of visiting it, just like going to Disney World or something like that. And you can spend 2 or 3 hours in Ikea pretty easily, and you can even eat there and stuff. But Ikea had this app where you can say, well, let's say there's a chair they sell there, and you want to know, well, what will this look like in my living room? Well, you can bring up that chair, and then you can use augmented reality, which is what you were talking about here, which instead of it being virtual, where you are looking at through these lenses and being virtually transported into a different venue, instead you're maybe looking through your smartphone, the camera. So if you have the camera up on your smartphone and you're looking around your room, you see the real room. Augmented reality then allows you to augment your actual reality with additional stuff. So what the app did is it allowed you to basically drop that chair into your real room and see what it would look like. How big is it going to be? Think about how useful that would be for like bed shopping. Where you have to, just got a new apartment, or you bought a new house or something like that, and you're out shopping for a bed, and you want to know, well, how big of a bed can I get? Will a king size bed fit in this room? And you have your measurements, and then you try to kind of like, well, yeah, it would fit. And you put it in there, and you got like 2 inches on each side of the bed to kind of scurry about. Well, you can kind of imagine what it might look like in there, or with augmented reality, you can see it in there. I think it's fair to say that AR and VR are kind of in a similar type of world. I think they do solve different problems, but I mean, I think there's practical uses for both, certainly. Okay, so now what I was getting at with this is there's a practical, so these are practical uses of VR. All of these can be accomplished with 3 degrees of freedom. Every one of them. Every one of these can. In fact, in some cases, having 3 degrees of freedom is better. Let me kind of ask that loaded question maybe. How might 3 degrees of freedom be better than 6 for watching a sports game, for example? Now I'm going to give you a hint. It has little to do with when you're sitting there watching the game. It has more to do with your ability to get up and move around. Anybody have any ideas before I tell you?
Well, then obviously during the game, I will not use the features of getting up and moving around much as the just sitting there and rotating.
Okay. You might tell yourself that, but in reality, and we'll get every now and then, you might want to get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of the game, right? And you don't want to miss any of the action. So, so the idea here is that with 3 degrees of freedom, now a lot of these devices now have have like pass-through vision. So it's not like you're getting up and feeling your way around the house, basically, blind. You can kind of see the world around you enough to navigate the world. And then you get to your new destination and, wherever that is, maybe it's the kitchen to get another drink or something like that. If you want to go with something a little bit less controversial, let's say, but, in any case, you can continue to watch it while you're traversing the world. And then once you get there, even if you just change locations in the house, maybe you're moving from one chair over to a different chair or to the couch or something like that. You can change and everything just kind of works. With 6 degrees of freedom, unless you put it into 3 degrees of freedom mode, which you can. So the Quest you can put in standalone mode. But otherwise, it's created a boundary system for you that assumes that you're playing doing some sort of experience that's requiring you to move around your environment. So now you get up from your chair, you've been watching this NBA game, you get up and you start walking towards the kitchen or whatever, and now it thinks that you've left your boundaries. It's screaming at you because you're going to be bumping into things and stuff like that. It's not designed for those standalone experiences. It's designed for more fully immersive experiences where you can move around completely in 3-dimensional space. So especially as you looked for today at the focusing on the Quest and other mobile devices, you saw that those 6 degrees of freedom devices, even though they've come way down in price, are still substantially more expensive than the 3 degrees of freedom devices. Now what's happening is the 3 degrees of freedom devices are just disappearing, and the 6 degrees of freedom are starting to have a mode that effectively allows them to operate as 3 degrees of freedom. All right. But we can't necessarily just say 6 degrees of freedom is better because you're paying a premium for something you might not need. My argument these practical uses of VR are the killer apps for VR. Let's just leave it at that. Okay. So if we think about how people should actually use VR, you don't need this super expensive setup. You don't need a lot of it is perception of video, watching movies. Something else I left out of here. So we can say watching movies. I usually like putting it on a 100-foot screen inside of a broom closet. Okay, so this has all sorts of other practical uses. I predict that somewhere in the relatively near future, right now they're kind of becoming somewhat popular, but a little niche. You got these things called tiny homes. There's all sorts of TV shows about tiny homes. If you've seen these shows, they basically your whole house is like the the size of maybe one of the smaller rooms in in your current house. Okay, or maybe it's kind of like the size of your living room in your apartment. You know, not even a big living room. That's the whole house. And you think about, well, how is that practical? Well, first of all, it takes a lot less land. They're a lot less expensive to build. You know, what do you need in a house? Well, you need a place to eat. You need a place to sleep. You need a place to, you know, watch your, you know, home entertainment, whatever. You know, some people like doing other things at houses, but if we just think about what are the bare essentials for shelter, a tiny home makes a lot of sense because you can save a lot of money. It costs less to live there. It costs less to build. It costs less to heat and cool and all those things. So there's a lot of advantages to it, but what you give up is some of these things that we've all kind of come to expect. Like a lot of us have entire rooms in our houses or multiple rooms in our houses dedicated to entertainment, right? You know, in my living room, I have a 70-inch TV. In my bedroom, I have a 70-inch TV. You know, no matter where I go, I need to have this giant TV on the wall in case I want to watch something. You know, we've become kind of a society of idiots or something like that. And I'll be the first to raise my hand that I'm one of those. But if you could experience, if you no longer needed the space for something like that, you didn't need a giant wall to put a big TV on and all these things, all of a sudden you bring into possibility a lot of things that weren't there before if you can modify your reality through virtual reality. You could be sitting on your sofa in your tiny home with technically the wall 3 feet in front of you, let's say, but you could be watching Netflix, you know, with your, like I could be watching with my wife. She has her own VR headset on. I have my own VR headset. We come together in VR in like there's like a venues thing, and we could be watching Netflix on a 100-foot screen from the couch in our tiny home. These things are they part of reality today. And it's part of what having mobile devices have allowed us to do. So kind of swing this back in to the connection to this class is mobile devices they are changing the way that we operate in the world. And they really are. And I think we're going to see that more and more as we move forward. Okay. So in my view, all these things here are the killer applications for VR. So what about amazing experiences? And, you know, really, we can come up here and we can just keep adding to this list. You know, for instance, I've never been skydiving in real life, but I've skydived in VR a bunch of times. And, you know, like somebody is wearing a 360 camera and they jump out of an airplane and I'm right there with them. So, you know, am I feeling the wind and all that stuff? Well, no, not yet. But what keeps us from across the hall here building a, you know, kind of things around that VR chair that allows us to incorporate things into the environment. So maybe it's wind, maybe it's smells, things like that. So we keep adding things, we keep augmenting our VR experience with more things that make virtual reality feel closer and closer to real reality, until at some point it's gonna be like real reality. I mean, I read a lot of science fiction type books that talk with VR, and you know, at some point you're gonna go into some place and they're gonna kind of put you in a coma or something like that and plug you into the virtual reality where you're basically there. You're in a whole different world, kind of like the Matrix or something like that. You know, and these kind of things just seem amazing to me, but these are right where we are today. We're right there. But if we think about amazing experiences in the context of what's kind of out there today, most of these are going to be with various video games. So kind of a cool example of this, maybe right now, what would be considered the best. Actually, you know what? I'm going to use a different one. I was gonna say Half-Life Alyx is kind of maybe what's considered to be the best VR game in terms of just being impressive, whatever. But I'm going to list two other examples. We're going to call it, one of them is called Super Hot, and the other one is called, why can't I think of the name of it? Music's playing, you have these two little lightsaber things, you're hitting these blocks as they're coming around. Beat Saber. All right, so both of these guys, so like Super Hot is actually a game that's been around for years and years and years and years and years. And the idea is, you know, you're kind of in this like weird eclectic world where, you know, nothing is high definition. All the people there are like these weird polygon type shapes. So the graphics aren't necessarily anything impressive, but they're abstract enough to feel like it's on purpose. But the idea is that the enemies, you know, your goal is to basically kill stuff and move through these levels. The enemies only move when you move. So part of the strategy of this game is standing still, making small movements just enough to, you know, turn, get a weapon ready, whatever it is. But even like dodging bullets and stuff like that, you're doing all this in slow motion. So this bringing that into virtual reality, where if you watched a person external, you know, they're sitting there with their headset on, their 6 Degrees of Freedom headset. Most of the video games are going to really require that. You're sitting there watching them from the outside. You're going to see this person, you know, ducking and jumping and turning and you know, dodging, whatever. They're going to see them doing all these big movements inside this virtual space. And you know, it's just kind of an amazing thing that they can, their whole life now, they become a character inside these games. Similar, Beat Saber and a lot of other examples have really brought the idea of exercise to VR. I play, so Beat Saber, you listen to music and you have these two little, you know, you have your two hand controls, but they're controlling these little lightsaber things. And, you know, you have these different color blocks flying at you and you're hitting these blocks while you're, you know, doing the, listening to the music, and, you know, it's you kind of sticking to the beat and the blocks come at you like that. I play on my Quest for exercise. I play this this like tennis game. It's like a 360 tennis game, and that's pretty cool. And you know, it does require 6 Degrees of Freedom. You're moving around and stuff. But for me, I'm not diving and ducking and things like that because I have to call Waleed over to my house to get me up. And then probably the rest of the class as well to help. But, you know, I used to be a tennis player, and this allows me to get some movement in that I wouldn't otherwise do. So it's really kind of changed the world of exercise, where you don't have to have these pieces of equipment all over your house or go to a destination, and you can kind of do this stuff. So there's so many killer applications for these, and those are the type things that maybe require 6 Degrees of Freedom, but I don't think it's where the killer app is. Let's see, VR headset. I'm looking at the chat here. VR headsets are used to enhance the experience of various rides. Yep, that's true. Even we take a step back. So she's mentioning like Universal Studios. I'm guessing probably in Orlando, Florida, but maybe out in California, but it doesn't matter, kind of they're same places. You know, for a long time, they've had these, call them 4D type rides, where, you know, they're blowing wind on you, you have some smells, the whole thing shaking, moving around and stuff like that. So it adds to the immersion thing. Well, now they've taken it a step further, where there's a lot of these rides that are incorporating things like VR into them, to make life even more and more you know, immersive, or to make the ride more and more immersive. And you can imagine, as those devices get more and more mobile, where you're not going to have to be tethered by a wire. I mean, that's really been the holdback with VR up to this point, is the people who could afford VR, or who had the computers that could drive it, were the PC gamers who expected VR to be a gaming platform. And they're the ones that had the graphics cards that could drive the VR experiences. Well, now our graphics cards have become more and more powerful. And what we have now is we have miniaturized versions of not graphics cards that are as powerful as can be on PCs today, but graphics cards that are as powerful as what was on PCs maybe a couple of years ago inside your smartphone. You know, and now you have something that could technically drive VR, maybe with a couple of trade-offs for graphics and things like that, but it can drive it completely wirelessly. And we're seeing more and more options of this thing of not being tethered to a computer. So now you're completely mobile in the world. And now you have companies like, Vive was one of the first ones to start working on this. It's actually through a company called Valve. So their newest device is called the Valve Index. The HTC Vive, HTC made the Vive, Valve made the Index, which is the same people who run Steam, which is let's call it a repository of applications for doing VR stuff. But these people made these different pieces of hardware, but they have these sensors. So there's kind of two different mechanisms for VR tracking. And this is related to this idea of mobile. So we're going to call this the best VR tracking is done with external sensors. All right, so this is the most accurate VR tracking. So this is called outside in tracking. You have 2 or 3 sensors, we'll say typically, set up in a room around where you will be using the VR. And the sensors track the headset and the hand controls movement in 3D space. So we're going to call this high quality tracking, but problematic when it comes to mobile computing, or call it mobile VR. We're going to call this the pretty good VR tracking is done with internal cameras. This is called inside out tracking. You have at least 2, often more, cameras that are tracking the environment around you as well as the hand controls. And it does not require external equipment. Oculus Quest works this way, and it is amazing how quickly you can set up a 3D environment basically anywhere you are. The idea it works, the way it works is you put the headset on and then it scans the room around you, and then it has you use one of the hand controls and you basically draw, your play space. This is the part of the room that I can be in without slamming into chairs and tables and other things. And then that sets up your boundary in there. So if you start getting too close to one of those things, it brings up a visual representation while you're in VR, so you know that you need to go the other direction. Otherwise, you're going to start slamming into stuff. Okay, but you can take that headset with you and in 20 seconds, pop it on and in any room, find your little corner or something that you can do some VR in, or even do standalone. I use my Quest while seated pretty often. So I use it kind of like the 3 degrees of freedom kind of experience. But in any case, this is a kind of a fascinating evolution in VR where we've moved away from these external cameras, these external sensors, which still give you the highest accuracy. But the accuracy of the inside out tracking is pretty good. It's not like it's garbage comparatively. And the convenience that you gain from it is almost immeasurable. With all that being said, homework for Monday, write a 3-page paper comparing and contrasting inside out tracking for VR versus outside in tracking for VR. What are the pros and cons of each? Where do you see the future heading and why? All right. Questions, comments, concerns, bribes? All right. I will see everybody on Monday.